Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, people of all religions, even if you don't believe, whatever you are, it doesn't matter. You have made it to the Exorcist review. Man, I got to tell you, I have not been this pumped up for a review in quite a while. I honestly, this might be the most hyped up I've ever been for a review that we've done so far.
Are you an Exorcist fan like that?
I I I'm gonna be honest with you, and this is gonna shock a lot of people. I think I've only seen this movie about 3 times.
Wow.
I have not seen it that many times, but I feel like I've been with this movie forever.
This movie is it's a staple in the genre. Yeah, I haven't seen it that many times either. I mean, I watched it like when I was old enough to watch it, like still as a kid, and wouldn't I, when you're that old and you're watching The Exorcist or movies like The Exorcist, you're watching for the scares, you're watching for the creepy things, you're watching for the eye candy, the talking scenes where the story is actually progressing. You don't care about those. So The Exorcist did not get the respect that it deserved when I watched it as a kid. Rewatching it now, though, rewatching it as an adult, I don't know, man. I don't want to. I don't want to drop a hot take before you. So give me something, man. Tell me about The Exorcist. Tell me about its legacy. Tell me about where you think it stands in the horror Hall of Fame.
Well, before I do any of that, I just want to give a disclaimer. This is going to be a long review. So I'm sure you can tell by the title card and the length of this video when you pull it up, but we have to go into every detail of this film.
You're getting the
Um,
extended director's cut.
that's right. You're getting the extended director's cut. So first off, I'll give you my backstory with this film. I was pretty much like you. Growing up as a kid, when I was starting to get into horror and starting to really, kind of explore the genre, the Exorcist always stood as like that film that was like, oh, like I don't think I'm ready for that yet. When I was growing up as a kid, it was like that one film. When you get to that film, that's when you know like you've made it, because in all intents and purposes, whether you agree or disagree, it's been titled the scariest movie of all time. What if you believe that or not? That's up to you. But I, this film has had such a cultural mark on society, on cinema, just in pop culture and everything. It's just been incredible. I didn't watch this movie for the first time till I was in high school, and I really didn't, like you said, I really didn't care for it that much. I just was kind of watching for the scary stuff. You're like, this is the '70s. Here it is, like 2010s or whatever. It's really not that scary. It's whatever. So I just kind of put it away. I and I just was like, oh, it is what it is. A couple of years back, actually during COVID, I got COVID and I had nothing to do. I said, you know what? I'm going to watch The Exorcist because why not? I've got nothing else to go on. I've been wanting to give it another chance for a long time. And I watched it, and God, I was probably what, 22, 23 years old at the time. I said, wow, this is not only a fantastic horror movie, this is just a fantastic movie on its own. And a couple days ago, me and you had the opportunity to go to the theaters and watch this for the upcoming 50th anniversary of this film, which is the day after Christmas, I believe. And they had it in theaters. Fathom Events puts this on. We did it with the thing. We'll probably do it with some more things. So we got to watch this thing on the big screen, how it should be seen. And I got to tell you, this movie went even higher up for me. And I don't even think that was possible. This movie is kicks ass. Okay. This movie is amazing. And that I've only seen it a handful of times, and I can't wait to watch it again at some point. But for me right now, everything that needs to be said about this film has already been said. So we're just going to try to do the best we can. This movie is a masterpiece.
You said the M word, man. I don't think we've said the M word yet. I don't know. I don't even know if I said that about the thing, but man, you dropped the M bomb on me.
It
All right.
is a masterpiece, in my opinion.
And not your opinion and many others. I mean, it's like you said, what can be said that hasn't already been said? I mean, there have been dissections after dissections after dissections, every frame, literally down to the frame of The Exorcist over the years. So we're not even going to pretend to compete with those. We're just going to give you what we saw. And the other day when we saw it in the theater, as the director intended, because hey, I don't know if you picked up on this yet. If you ain't watching movies in the movie theater, get the fuck out of here. If you ain't supporting your local movie theater, if you just sit back and watch things at home and think that's the experience, or God forbid you watch movies on your phone, get the fuck out of here. I don't care how old the movie is. I don't care if it's 50 years old. If it's a movie like this, if it is a classic, if it is coming back to cinema and you weren't there for the initial release hype, do yourself a favor and go see it. I don't care how many times you've seen it. This year alone, I've gone to 6 anniversary showings. I've gone to Jurassic Park. I've gone to They Live. Last year I went to The Thing. Now I went to The Exorcist. And let me tell you, look, we're gonna give you our top, our 10 favorite horror movies of all time, are like our personal favorites. I'm not gonna get into that right now, but not only is The Exorcist on that list of mine, I wholeheartedly believe in all of my viewing experience that The Exorcist 1973 is the greatest horror film ever made. I believe that. I've always believed it. And this past weekend reinforced that idea. I don't think I'm ever going to change that because, oh my God, if there was a grade above A plus, this movie would get it. It, I, I mean, it is what it is right there. It's the greatest horror film of all time. Some people agree with that. Whether it's the scariest, that's a tough word because scary is objective. You know, to a toddler, a balloon popping is scary. You know, so scary is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. So I can't say that it's the scariest. I don't think there's any movie that appropriately deserves scariest because it's such an objective term. But in terms of grading, structure, creation, lasting impact, The Exorcist, I believe, is the greatest horror film in history.
I don't think you're wrong. Like you said, at some point we will do a top 10. We will each do our top 10's favorites of all time. This movie for me is, I'll go ahead and give you a hint. It's in the top 2. I
Holy
can
shit.
it's in the top 2.
Wow.
I can't tell you if it's 1 or 2. I can't tell you what the other one is. I know that you probably know what it is. I've told you before, but I have to watch that movie again before I get to that point.
I want to
But
do a head to head when we get to that point. I
we
want to
will.
debate those.
We will. We'll each do our top 10. We'll have 20 films total. You get 10,
Hell yeah.
I get 10. We'll go at it. So, but, you know, we saw this movie and there were things, like you said, there's, okay, there's nothing wrong with sitting on the couch watching a movie on Hulu,
No.
Netflix. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are certain movies that you have to, when you see them on your TV versus when you see them on the big screen, it can make or break a movie.
Mm-hmm.
I already love this movie. Seeing it in this screening, seeing things that I never felt before, sitting beside other people, maybe except for the people that were sitting beside you.
Fuck those people. Oh my God.
But other than that, it just took this thing up a notch that I didn't even know. I don't even know there's any more notches to go. It's hitting the ceiling. Where else can this movie go? It can't get any higher. Like you said, if there was something above an A plus, you'd give it to it, but you can't.
Yeah. And did it, so two-part question for you. Did it take seeing it in the theater to reach that point? And what do you think about seeing it in the theater? What do you think it was about watching it in the theater that took it to that point? I mean, is it because we watched the extended cut? Is it because we were surrounded in an atmosphere? Is it because you weren't distracted? Is it the movie itself? What do you think it was?
I think it was a mix of things. First off, the first time when I recently watched it in 2020, I knew it was automatically a classic and I loved it. But, it when you have COVID and you're laying in bed and you're watching it is a lot different than being present, wanting to watch it. You feel like a normal person wanting to watch the movie. But whenever you're at the theaters, you're in, we're comfortable seating. There's people around. It adds to the atmosphere, the sound system. I'm hearing things that I haven't heard before. The screen's just bigger. It's highlighting things I maybe haven't seen before. And I think just a mix of all that just made it even better because I went into this movie whenever we watched it a couple days ago. I was like, I wonder maybe there's something I might not like about it as much. Maybe I overhyped it just a bit. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I'm glad I wasn't wrong because this made it even better.
Yeah, and I went into it the same way too. I had only ever seen The Exorcist on family's TV, my computer, in headphones. I'd never experienced it the way movies are supposed to be experienced. Because let's be real, the theater came before the television. What do you think movies are made for? So you got to experience it in a theater. I had never had that. So I was expecting to see, okay, this thing's amplified in every possible way. That means that any flaws are also amplified. I'm going to see them, I'm going to hear them. The only thing I saw and heard was the lack of any flaws whatsoever. And I'll tell you what, I knew that this was, in my opinion, the greatest horror film of all time. But watching it in the theater, you know what surprised me the most? I got goosebumps at the scary scenes.
Same,
This,
same.
this. First of all, we're talking about a 50-year-old movie. That's half a century of films that could one up it. I've watched at least 500 horror films, maybe, probably more. I've seen things that have scared me. I've seen things that have had a lasting impact. I see things that get me with the jump scares. This movie from the 1970s has no reason to get me. Okay. I've seen it before too. But you know what it was for me out of anything else? It wasn't because it was the extended cut, it was the sound. The listening to it on the speakers, on the biggest speakers possible, loud as shit.
Yeah.
I got this whole new dimension of just aura and aesthetic around it that I don't hear on TV speakers. There is a lot of sound design and sound choices in this movie that have revolutionized the way I see this movie. And now I can't even like watch it in my living room because I'm not allowed to turn my speakers up that high. It's ridiculous. But some of the sound, I had goosebumps on my arm. And let me tell you, I haven't been the victim of a jump scare since Insidious. 13 years ago was the last time I was the victim of a jump scare. This movie got me. And you know what got me about this movie? Wasn't anything you think. It was a fucking phone ringing. A phone ringing jump scare got me in 2023 with a 50-year-old movie. So that just goes to show, man, timeless is as timeless does. And as much as I love The Thing, John Carpenter, that's my number one favorite horror movie of all time. This is this is the greatest, man. It just is.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, here we are, 15, 20 minutes into this, and I don't think we've even
We haven't
just
said shit, dude.
talked about the movie at all. But you're right when you said that. When I watched this, like when I watched it a couple of years ago, I like, yeah, some of the scenes that were scary, could be a bit tame by today's standards. But some of them I'm like, oh wow, that's kind of, I could see why that was super scary in the 70s. I mean, it
Yeah.
still could be a bit scary now. But dude, I gotta tell you, man, like watching this, like on the big screen, like the scary scenes that I knew were coming actually kind of got to me. I was like, damn, like that was like that's good. Like that kind of freaked me out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's one of those I know a movie is good or it made an impact when the movie's over and I go home at night and I think about it and I want to like research into it, or the next couple of days I look into it on YouTube or online, or I just think about it in my head. Those are the kind of movies that stick with you. And this movie sticks with you. Everything this movie does sticks with you, even from the scary parts to just the story driven parts. This movie sticks with you. And that is a sign of a great film. Like you said, this movie's getting ready to be 50 years old. It does things that movies this day and age wish they could do, and they never will be able to do it.
Yeah, they wish they could do it, and I don't know what the secret sauce is. I don't know if it's the cinematography. I don't know if it's the directing. I don't know if it's the acting. All these things are great. All these things are A1, but I don't know what the one thing is. I don't know what the straw that broke the camel's back is. It could be the writing, man. It was written by William Blatty. Am I saying that right?
Correct. William Peter Blatty.
Yeah, he wrote the book The Exorcist in 1971, I think it was, and he actually wrote the screenplay for this. So immediately, I mean, book to film adaptations are never good. Okay, my fiance has a tattoo and it says the book was better. Okay, because every single movie that has ever been made about a book has always had things stripped from it, has had things cut from it. Obviously, you get the people who are reading the book and being like, the book was better. You know, that it's a running joke in my household because we know that it's indisputable truth. But if I'm going to have someone write a screenplay for a movie adaptation of my book, it's going to be me or it's going to be nobody. So I'm glad that the author wrote this. He gave it time. I put all my trust into him writing this screenplay, even if he's not a screenplay writer, because nobody knows the book better than him. Nobody can make the judgments to cut things or to change things better than him. So up until this past week, I don't think I even knew that it was a book. That's how strong this movie is. So I'm reading comments about how in the book this was fleshed out a little better, and in the book this was changed, and in the book this character had a bigger dude, whatever. Okay. If the literal author of the book cut it out for the film, I trust the film version and I cannot take points away from that.
Correct. I agree. You know, this was a novel, and this was, you know, we'll kind of start to get into the history of the film a little bit here. This was based on a true story, which you hear that term quite a lot now in horror, based on true events, based on a true story. This was actually based on, you know, whether you believe in this or not. You know, there was reports of a young kid in the 40s or 50s. He went under the pseudonym of Roland Doe. It kind of was a national news story about, you know, a real life exorcism that happened with this kid, and that kind of got the inspiration for this for the story. Then Peter Blatty, you know, wrote the novel, and then here we are, we get the film. And for me, another thing that adds another level, another notch to a great movie is when there's even better history behind it.
Hmm.
And this film, there are probably, I don't know if there's maybe a handful of films that have as strong of a history behind the filming, behind this movie, than this movie does. I mean, you've heard all the stories, people in the 70s lining up for hours to see this movie, people passing out at scenes of this movie, people leaving the theaters, they were so scared. I mean, it works today. I told you whenever we got out, I said if I could go see one movie when it premiered, it would be this movie. If I could go take a time machine, me and Stewie could take his time machine and go back in time to the 70s and watch this movie on opening night, you couldn't put a price on it because it would be that incredible. Just to see everybody's reaction would just be phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that adds to the theater experience too. This isn't an episode about movie theaters, I promise you, but being surrounded by people who are experiencing the same thing you are adds validity to it. It adds confirmation bias. It adds energy to it. It really does. And you know, people are literally fainting from this movie. That means something, okay? Obviously, it means something by 1973 standards. Some things that were taboo back then aren't taboo now.
Correct.
We grow as a society, right? But movies now still try to replicate that feeling and that vibe and that promise of you're gonna faint at this movie. Like I remember Paranormal Activity did it. Most recently, I think Terrifier or Terrifier 2 did it, where it was like candid camera, people were fainting at the theater. Movies I think movie studios would pay millions of dollars to get the kind of publicity that this movie was getting in the 70s. I mean, you had the literal Vatican denouncing this movie. I don't see them doing that about anything else. Get them
No.
on the line with anything else, let alone a movie. And the day after Christmas with a movie like this, when nothing had been that taboo up to then, I mean, you're talking about a very sensitive subject the day after the sensitive subject's holiday. Like, oh my goodness, you know? So the publicity around this movie, it didn't even need a trailer, dude. Okay. Word of mouth. Word of mouth is your strongest asset when it comes to promoting a movie. And this movie actually had a good reason to have that kind of word of mouth, and they didn't manufacture it like most modern movies today. So, yeah, I wish I was in that crowd.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible, and I mentioned the history of this film. You've got all the things that happen on set, the Exorcist curse, bad things happening on set, bad things happening to the people involved in the film, bad things happening to the family members of the people in the film, the actors, just all this stuff, the stuff that happened after the film. I mean, it just builds the legacy up of this movie to a I mean, I almost love reading about the movie as much as I do the movie itself because of all the things that happen, all the behind the scenes stuff that you don't see, and it's just incredible. I mean, this film was banned in the UK, I think, until like the 90s. It was been banned by other places as well, and it they wanted it to get an X rating. I don't know how it didn't get an X rating, um, but it just we've talked about this for what 30 minutes. We haven't even talked about the movie.
And you know what? And then that's fine because everyone knows the movie. Everyone knows The Exorcist, or they at least have an idea of it. And if they don't, they need to get their asses out and get that movie tomorrow. It should be in everybody's collection. But you touched on a major topic. One of the biggest things, one of my biggest draws to this movie is the Exorcist curse. I mean, you could write a book on that. People believe that, you know, William Blatty and William Friedkin was his
Correct.
name.
Correct.
Blatty and Friedkin, they created something, and people all the way up to the Vatican were believing that they were actually channeling the devil or demons. They were actually going against Christianity or Catholicism, and they were channeling some really negative stuff by making this movie. That's why it was so taboo. That's why they wanted an X rating. That's why they believe this film is cursed, and that's part of what solidified it in the greatest of all time for me. Is this curse? I mean, as tragic as it all is, obviously, um, people died making this movie in unexplained circumstances. Do you know how many people died making this movie?
I don't know.
So behind the scenes, off the scenes, relatives of people working on the movie, whoever the curse could touch, 9 people died. 9. That's insane to me. And these are we're not even talking about a movie anymore. These are real individuals who either died in mysterious causes or freak accidents. One of them was a newborn. So you had things you had things happening. You had stage props falling. You had all the telltale signs that there was demonic possession going on. And I don't believe for a minute that that was all just publicity. Maybe a little bit. Maybe it was kind of, obviously it was told to us, but I don't believe for a second that that was all publicity because, hey, regardless of if you believe in that stuff or not, the people who do saw something wrong with this and they were calling to ban it. So powerful, powerful stuff. I mean, how many movies nowadays have this super edgy Satanist theme and pentagrams and human sacrifice and goats and bleh. How many movies do that nowadays? A dime a dozen.
Correct.
And how many possession and exorcism movies are there? At least one a year, good or not. So back then it hadn't been done. This was completely new ground that they were breaking. Cardinal rule number 4: push the boundaries. No movie pushed the boundaries like The Exorcist.
No.
So the world knew about it when it was coming, and the world still knows about it. Yeah, we have more shocking stuff today, but think about the world 50 years ago if you can. Remember it if you can. Could you imagine some of the shit they got away with? Oh my god.
I I know. I mean, back in that era, you could imagine something like this coming out and seeing it in theaters. Back then society was not what it is today. Lots of conservative family values, people people that are super into Christianity and things like that. Hard belief in God and in faith, and we still have that obviously, but back then it was way more more of a societal thing, and to have something like this come out, I mean, it blew the doors off. But it go ahead.
I was just gonna say, man, people laugh. People laugh at that because it's like, oh, by today's standards, that's pretty tame. Yeah, we get it. Okay, we get it. But dude, this was like, I've seen some shocking shit, dude. I've seen some illegal shit. I've seen a Serbian film. I've seen Cannibal Holocaust twice. That stuff, that's kind of stuff that sticks with you. That is what The Exorcist did to general audiences 50 years ago. I mean, have you ever seen Cannibal Holocaust?
I have not, no.
Don't watch it. But it has a lasting impact with you. And it had the lasting impact of it had the same lasting impact that had with me, that with general audiences back then. They had never seen that. We hadn't even gotten to Halloween yet. Michael Myers didn't come out for another 5 years. The Thing
Right.
didn't come out for another 9. So what did you have before this? Psycho? When did Texas Chainsaw Massacre come out?
I think it
73?
was 74, I think the year after.
Yeah, okay, so you are just breaking new ground, and this is the route you go, this almost anti-religious route when the whole world is, like, more conservative than it is in the next 50 years? Oh
Correct.
my goodness, dude, the balls, dude. Oh, I love it.
I love it. I love it. And the last thing I'll say before we start to get into the film, and we'll talk about more of the behind the scenes stuff as we go through the scenes. But and another we talk about all the great things this movie did, just in terms of society. It also did great things for the critics. Horror had never really been a part of the conversation when it came to the big boys, as far as Oscars and nominations and things like that. This film was nominated for 10 Oscars.
Oh my
That
god.
says something
I
about.
didn't know that.
I don't even know. I don't watch the Oscars. I couldn't tell you the last time I did, or
How
the
many did it
last.
win?
um I'm not sure. I know it won a couple. I got to look into it. The thing I'm looking at now says it was just nominated for 10. I'm sure it won some, but
Must have.
I mean, I don't even know movies today that get nominated for 10 Oscars. I mean, I'm
I
sure there are, but I don't keep up with it. But back then, dude, that's huge.
Yeah, and that's when the Oscars were new too. Dude, I mean, like, when you talk about double digits Oscar nominations, I'm thinking Titanic, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. I can't even think of a third one. So, I mean, look where Titanic and Return of the King are in our history. I mean, that is,
Correct.
if aliens wrote a book on human history, those things would be name dropped. So, The Exorcist has solidified itself. I can't speak on the sequels and all that, and all the whatever else, and all the ripoffs, all the Exorcism and Possession movie ripoffs. I can't speak on those. But The Exorcist paved new ground, and there's some religious conversations to be had, and I am not the guy to have them with, because I just do not know what I'm talking about in that area. But this movie, I think, could also be discussed in, like, religious classes.
Yeah.
So this is a big movie, man. Why are we? What are we? 30 minutes in? We haven't said shit about the movie. I love
I
it,
don't.
man.
I exactly. And if you don't love it, I'm sorry. I told you this is going to be a long review, and we
Ish.
haven't even started the review yet.
Yeah, dude.
I looked it up. It did win 2 Oscars.
For
Um,
what?
it says Best Director for Freakin' and Best Actress in a Leading Role, Ellen Burstyn. Um, so yeah, it was nominated for 10. It got 2, but still, I mean, that's
Surprised Linda
still.
Blair didn't win it.
So she actually was nominated for Best Supporting Actress,
Okay.
but but it was controversial because of the voice acting was not done by her.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And the lady who did the voice acting, which we'll get into, she actually sued because she had like a Writers Guild credit or something like that, and she sued because she wasn't credited for the film. So that was kind of a whole thing. Another thing to add behind the story of the film. But and then last thing I'll say before we get into the review, you kind of touched on it there. Anytime you see a movie come out and it has something about possession, demons, antichrist, whatever it is, what is the number one thing they're trying to rip off The Exorcist.
Oh, always. Oh, that's the gold standard.
That's the gold standard. This movie spawned, was it the first demon possession film? No, it wasn't. But it did it the best, and no one has been able to come. I mean, there's been some good possession. I actually personally, I know there's a lot of crappy ones. I may get some crap for this. I do love a good possession film. I think they're interesting. I do. But there's not a lot of good ones, and you can tell because they've tried to rip this thing off so many times.
Yeah, there are some good possession movies. There are a couple good, like The Last Exorcism has no connection to this movie whatsoever. I like that movie. The Possession I think was pretty good. I can't think of others by name because they all blend together, but you get it, man. Look up the word exorcist, exorcism, or possession. You're gonna get a billion of these movies, man.
Oh God, yeah, exactly. So, all right, we'll actually get into some of this film because we've talked about it, how great it is. We gotta get into it.
Got it, right?
So this movie starts out in a way that, and I tell you what, a lot of people, if you tell, and I've seen people online say, "Oh, this movie's not scary. It's not that bad." Okay, whatever. It's 1970. I think a lot of people do themselves a disservice by reading into this. If you haven't seen it, now if you have, this doesn't include you, but if you haven't seen it, a lot of people go into this thinking, "Oh, this is going to be the scariest movie. I'm ready for like scares nonstop." This movie isn't like that. There are a lot of scares in this movie, but if you go into this thinking it's going to be the scariest movie of all time, especially in the beginnings where they're in Iraq and all that stuff, you're going to be bored out of your mind because that's all you're thinking about is the scares. It's not about that. It's about the story. The scares are just the icing on the cake.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's not a thrill a minute ride, man. You're not gonna see guts. You're not gonna see a crazy demon all lanky and gangly running around the room. It's just not like that, man. Don't go into it with a modern audience mind state. Go into it for the story, immerse yourself in it. And I swear to God, man, you watch it, don't pick up your phone. Don't pick up your phone while you're watching it. I promise you, you'll get sucked in. You will feel it. This is a movie that you can feel. And that is where most of the scares come from. I talked about the sound, I talked about watching it as loud as possible. I actually felt evil coming through the speakers. I actually felt that demonic presence coming through the sound. It's so masterfully crafted that if you just use your eyes, you're going to miss out everything that makes this movie special.
Absolutely. So you said it. Let's get into it. The film starts out in Iraq. That's right. Not in a crazy bedroom. Starts out in Iraq. And we are introduced to Father Marin, who will introduce in the beginning of the film, does not show up until the very end of the film, but he does play an intricate role in this movie. He's played by Max von Sydow, which I'm not sure if you know this. You probably do. At the time when he filmed this, he was in like his 40s. And when you watch him in this movie, he looks like he's about 80 or 90. That's how good the special effects were.
Yeah, I thought the guy was like at least 65, like retirement age.
No, he was in his 40s in real life when he did this. So great job there on the special effects. So he's on there. He's on a dig and an archaeological dig in Iraq. He's going through all this stuff, and then he's notified, "Hey, we found something." He goes and he looks. He picks up this little artifact, and it's kind of like a bizarre figure, kind of a demonic looking thing, whatever it is. And then he looks at it. And he knows something is wrong, and just there's really not a lot of dialogue in this Iraq scene. It's just a lot of him walking and a lot of sounds, and that's what I love about this movie, especially watching it on the big screen. Is you just hear these sounds of people just in the background and just the wind and just parts of sounds that just fill up the atmosphere and just make it this grandiose thing. And all he's doing is just walking around and taking his pills and taking a drink, and there's not that much dialogue.
Yeah, and that's intentional. Now, everything in this movie is intentional. It's very masterfully crafted. The lack of dialogue is intentional because you want Friedkin wanted to give the audience a feeling that there was everything going on around you. You felt like you were being watched. You felt uncomfortable, social anxiety a little bit. I mean, you have Father Marin in a crowded marketplace. No one's talking to him. No one's bumping into him. He looks around. You get some hermits looking at him and then looking around. He walks by a guy with one eye. He's got a whited out eye, looking at him. Like uneasiness. They're trying to capture this feeling of uneasiness. And remember, you're filming on film. Okay, this isn't digital. You can't just delete it and go back and do another take. I mean, it costs fucking money to film these things. So everything had to be perfectly calculated, and it was. The lack of interaction with the world around him. Maybe there was a theme of feeling alone, or like I said, feeling watched, or feeling overwhelmed with just like a head rush. Maybe he was interpreting it as a headache and all this noise when really like it was something else because he uncovered the artifact. It was intentional, man. He goes to the, I guess, artifact appraiser. He takes the head there, and they dropped one line, and they said, "What did he say?" It said, "Evil counteracts evil," or something like that.
I something like that. I know what you're saying though. Yeah.
It's something like that, and then the pendulum and the clock behind him.
Wait,
Stop.
I know what he said.
What did you say?
Evil dies tonight. And that's the movie, the best horror film of all time. Evil
Uh,
dies tonight.
I can't even tell you how much you just killed my buzz right now. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh yeah. No, he says something about evil, and the pendulum and the clock stops behind him. And right then and there, like he uncovered something. But he keeps walking through Iraq. This whole Iraq sequence is long, huh?
Yeah, it is. It's long, it's drawn out, and there's this he knows something's wrong, so he has to leave. And then we kind of see him going on this walk, and he's driving to get somewhere in Iraq, and he finds it, and we get this scene where he's kind of standing on this dirt mound or this hill, and then the same figure that he was looking at, he now turns around and he sees the bigger version of it, the statue of it, kind of in front of him. And while the scene gets built up, the wind is rustling. There's dirt going through the air. You've got the sounds of the dogs fighting in the background. I love that. I don't know why. I just love that. It just adds to it, and you just know like something. You don't really know what it is, but you know something's about to go down. He just is looking at the statue, this figure, and he's like, you're just like, damn, those two people, like those two entities, something is going to happen at this point. This means something. You don't know what it is, but it just builds this uneasy feeling.
Yeah, and the way it's angled too, the cinematography, the way the shot is composed. Father Marin's obviously standing on a rock a couple yards away from the statue. Statue's easily 15 feet tall, maybe.
Yeah.
The way it's angled is that although Father Marin is in the foreground, um, the statue of this demon and Father Marin are equal in height. Um, you can interpret that as they're equal in power, they're equal in importance, um, they're equal in terms of how aware they are of each other. There's multiple interpretations, and none of them are wrong. But make no mistake that the position that they had Father Marin stand in, and the position of the statue, and the position of the camera, all intentional, man. All
That's
intentional.
right.
There's a lot of
It's
stuff like that. I'm probably gonna get a little bit nitty gritty a lot in this movie, but there's so much. Every single frame has something intentional.
visual storytelling at its best. Nothing better than the camera doing all the work for you and you not having to say anything at all.
Easy job.
It's the best. So that scene kind of wraps up. Then we jump back to the U.S. where we're in Georgetown, kind of in Washington, D.C. area. And this is where we get introduced to some of the main cast of the film. We get introduced to Chris McNeil and her daughter, Reagan. Um, Chris is a famous actress. She's working on a new movie that's there in DC. I don't know what it's called. I can't remember. We get these scenes where it's kind of cool because you get to see what it's like. I've never been in a movie. You've been an extra in a movie before,
Yep,
haven't you?
I've been an extra in 3 movies. One of them was a
Three.
horror movie.
That's right. So it's kind of cool to see like the background of like how it was working as an extra in a movie. You kind of see this like fleshed out, and
Yep.
then William Peter Blatty actually is one of the extras who's like talking to the director. You might not see it if you don't know what he looks like, but he's in that. So he makes a little appearance there. So we get this scene, and they're kind of filming the movie, and we get introduced to the characters. We get Burke Dennings, who we'll get into in a little bit. He is the director of this film. And then we've got Chris, who I mentioned earlier, who is the mom. She's the one that's going through all the stuff. And then kind of in that format, when we're there, Chris walks out and saying her lines in the megaphone and all that stuff, we kind of get shadowed to the background, and we see Father Karras. And we kind of get introduced to him a little bit later on in the film. And I gotta be honest with you, the more I've researched into this movie and the more I've looked into it and seen it, this isn't necessarily a movie about a girl getting possessed. It's a movie about a man who is a priest and psychologist who is struggling with losing his faith, struggling with his mother becoming elderly and then eventually dying, and just figuring out who he is. And the more you watch this film and the more you get into it, you realize that it's more of Father Karras's movie than it is a possession movie. The other stuff that's happening, it's just going on.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you caught that. Yes, I am under the understanding that it is not Reagan's movie. It is Father Karras's movie. Father Karras is the main character in this movie. The scene of him walking away from Chris as she's doing her thing over here and he's going his separate way is kind of about like, oh, their roads are diverging right now, but they'll cross again. She's of the worldly, she's of the worldly pleasures and the worldly occupations, and he's of the more heavenly, fatherly occupation. He's going his way. So their roads diverge, but they will cross again. But you are right. It is Father Karras's movie. Father Karras is the main character. I don't know if he gets the most screen time, but it starts with him, it ends with him.
Correct. So it is his film, and you might not realize that in the beginning, but
Mm-mm.
so and then he's going through the struggle where like I mentioned earlier, he's losing his faith. He's talking to members of the Catholic Church. He wants out. He doesn't want to be in this role anymore. While he's also a priest, he's also a psychiatrist for the church as well. So he's talking to some of the other priests that work there. They're at a bar. And he's like, I want out. I think I'm losing my faith. I'm not fit. They're like, you're the best. You're the best we have. And he's like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm just not feeling it. And then we kind of get introduced to what's really on his mind is that his mom, who's elderly, lives in New York. He lives in DC. So he's making these trips up there to go help her. He can't move her anywhere away from her house or anywhere closer because he just doesn't have the money to make that happen, to put her in a proper care place. So we see this struggle of him, this guy just having to take care of his elderly mom, and it's really weighing on him. And that's something that a lot of people go through. Hey, I wish I could do better for my elderly parents. I can't. I have to have the struggles of having to go through and help them and being far away from them. I mean, that's normal everyday stuff that people go through, and it's very relatable, and you kind of feel for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very real struggle, and it's part of the reason he loses his faith, honestly. He's torn. He's obviously going through stuff, and even his occupation is a symbol of being torn. I mean, he's both a father and a psychiatrist. I mean, typically religion and science are usually at odds with each other.
Correct.
So to be the church's psychiatrist or whatever it is kind of hints at this conflict of interests, and his whole story in the first act, you get it, man. He's torn. He's torn. He goes into a subway and he's wearing his what do you call that thing? What do you call that white thing, man? The Roman necktie, I
I
think, or
I know what
something
you're
like that.
talking about. Yeah,
He's clearly dressed up for his occupation. A homeless man in the subway who might be blind, might not be,
yeah,
is like, "Can you spare some change, Father?" And he just looks at him and walks away. He doesn't help. So he's he's torn. He's having conflict of interest. He doesn't know where his priorities lie. There is a great internal struggle with Father Karras.
absolutely. So we've got that going on, and then on the flip side of things, we've got the at-home life between Chris and Reagan, where in the beginning it seems like, hey, and this is one of the things I love about this movie, and I'll touch on it here in a second, but I'll set it up. Chris, she's a famous actress, she's got tons of money, she's got servants that work at the house for her, she's got a nice house, or you know, she's got all this stuff. Um, and she has a great relationship with her daughter, who's played by Linda Blair, which if you want to talk about one person that's like synonymous with a role, like you're gonna talk about her as Reagan, like I think Linda Blair is probably like in her 60s or 70s now, and like
Yeah.
that's still what she's known for.
Dude, that's it, man. Robert Englund will always be Freddy. Multiple people will be Michael Myers. Linda Blair will always be Reagan, man.
That's right. So when we get to see their relationship, and they seem like good people, but then we kind of learn to understand that she's kind of a single mom. The dad's not there; he's somewhere else. He's not really a part of the family, and that's another thing that is relatable in the story. And you start to get really attached to these characters, and that's one of the great things about this film is you have characters that are fleshed out that you grow to like and you care for. We haven't even got to the scary stuff yet. We don't even care about that. We just like the characters themselves.
Yeah, and it's a realistic family dynamic. Even though she's an actress, and even though she's clearly well off, she's got a three-story house with servants in it. I mean, even though she's well off, that you sympathize. You see the real grounded Midwestern American family in this depiction, even though the father's not in the picture. So, it's good characters all around. And if you don't have that, what do you have?
Correct. Absolutely. So, and we everything's fine. And then we kind of get the scene a little bit later on in the film where they're downstairs, they're talking, the two kid Reagan and Chris, and then all of a sudden Reagan pulls out this Ouija board. Now, okay, if you're talking in terms of 2023, the Ouija board, oh my God,
It's on everything.
it's been outdone too many times to talk. I think there's even a series called Ouija, or there's a board and a
There's a
film
movie.
called a movie called Ouija. But yeah, you understand what I'm saying. Ouija
Yeah.
board, you get it, possession, whatever. But back then, I don't think that was really a thing. And the way that they kind of talk, they bring it up and they talk about it and they just kind of like play with it and have fun. But they just kind of like, oh, okay, we'll put it away. Like it's not really brought into like, oh, this is how the demon got here. It's just a very nonchalant, hey, we're just having a good time, messing around. Okay, put it away. Let's go have fun. And I like that because you might not even catch it as the reason why this happens because it's very nonchalant.
You think the Ouija board is the reason why the demon's there in the first place?
I think it's certainly one of the possibilities because as we've come to know, Ouija boards have become synonymous with people becoming possessed, bringing demons in. I mean, I think it's certainly a possibility. I mean, what do you think it is exactly?
Maybe it's just because it was the movie version, but I didn't get any kind of explanation, or I didn't pick up on anything about the Ouija board. It's one of those things that could have been cut completely and it would have been fine. I don't think the Ouija board was the reason for the demonic possession. I think the Ouija board in this story, and thank God it was this way, it was just a tool for communication, first and foremost, and only. I think the demonic possession was there before the Ouija board. I don't think it was there because of the Ouija board. I know she explained that she found it in the closet, but it, I think the Ouija board was just put in there because it was way more taboo back then.
Mhm.
But I don't think the Ouija board summoned the demon. I think the demon found his way to Reagan regardless, on its path to Father Karras. I don't think the Ouija board summoned the demon. I think the Ouija board was it. Maybe it's fleshed out in the book, but my headcanon, my idea is that the demon put it there so Reagan could communicate, so Reagan could develop this bond with this Captain Howdy, as he comes to be called,
Mhm.
previous to us being introduced to him. It's his way of earning Reagan's trust, I think, and communicating and establishing that connection. So, no, I don't think the Ouija board is the reason for the demon, but I think it's very intentional on behalf of the demon.
Interesting. I never really thought about it like that. I mean, that could very well be true.
I don't know. I haven't read the book. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I haven't either. I've wanted to read it, but I don't know. I just the way that it happens just very nonchalant. It could be the reason why it could not, because there's never really a direct answer. Hey, this is how it happened, which
And it
is
never comes
great.
up again.
No, which is great. It might in the sequels. I don't remember. I don't know. But as in this film, they don't really talk about it. So, this is when things start to kind of pick up a notch. Chris is having this party. And over the past couple days, Reagan, she's not really feeling that well. She's kind of feeling like, in the beginning, you see her super playful and she's talking and, she's doing all this stuff like a normal kid. And then the past couple days, she's just kind of like, not like she's sick, kind of, I guess. And then Chris has this party and she's had all these famous people over in DC, the actors, actresses, directors, all this stuff. And we get this scene. I mentioned this Burke Dennings guy, and he comes in the film and he's at this party. He's just absolutely wasted, and I don't know if he's British, I don't know what he is. I'm sorry, but he's got this accent, and I can't stand his character. I'm glad that something happens to him later on in the film, but it's interesting because he's at this party, he's wasted, and he's saying all this stuff. He's talking to this one of the butlers, and he's making like Nazi jokes to him and stuff, and it's just
Eccentric
so
director stuff.
exactly. He's very an eccentric director, like da. I'm wearing a parka, I can do whatever. About I don't
I
know.
have a turtleneck. I can talk like this.
Yes, so he's doing all this stuff, and at some point during this party, um, Chris goes upstairs, the window's open, it's super cold. She does that a lot. She goes in to check on Reagan and the window's open. It's getting colder in the room. And at some point at this party, there's a couple of them downstairs. You've got one of the priests there. He's playing piano. Everybody's hanging out. They sent Burke home. He's drunk. They said, "Hey, your cab's down the road. Take your drunk ass out of here. Goodbye."
Hmm.
And he leaves. And then this is when stuff starts to happen. Reagan comes downstairs, and one of this guy, he's been talking about something, and she just comes
Going to the moon,
downstairs.
I think it was, or being an
Yeah,
astronaut.
going to the moon, being an astronaut, and then she just comes with this blank expression. You're gonna die up there, and then she just pisses all over the floor. Well, maybe it is a bit hilarious in today's standards, but at the time, that didn't happen, and it's just very alarming. And then Chris is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, my daughter's sick. Like she's going through some things." She takes her upstairs, starts giving her a bath, lays her down, and that's it. It's very small.
So it is small, but as with everything else in this movie, it is intentional. And it is the demon doing that. What is your idea as to why the demon made Reagan go down there and piss herself in front of everybody?
I gotta be honest with you, I have no idea. Do you?
I don't know for sure. Uh, it could just be her going crazy, but my idea, and I think I read part of this online, I don't want to claim it as my idea, is that the demon knew that the priest was there. The demon knew that I didn't know my headphones talked to me. I've had these headphones for a year, and it just told me battery low. Sorry, that threw me off. What the hell?
Battery low. Please charge now.
Yeah, what the hell? I've never gotten battery low. Anyways, the demon knew the priest was there. So the demon knew if it made its presence known, it would be caught. So it wanted to make it seem like Reagan was struggling. It wanted to make it look like Reagan was having some kind of issues, some kind of mental issues. didn't want to manifest itself as a possession just quite yet, but it knew that the priest was its way to Father Karras. Because you got to think about the idea that this is Father Karras' movie. And again, I haven't read the book. I could be talking on my ass totally, and I probably am. But I like chewing on these things. I like chewing it and coming up with my explanations. The idea that it's Father Karras' movie is reinforced by, if you think about it, the demon wants Father Karras because a man of God who's turning away from God, there is no better final prize. There is no better finish line than to reach a man of God and turn him away from God. So that's my idea, and I'm running with it. I like it. I haven't seen the sequels, but I like that idea enough. I think that the demon knew that the priest was downstairs, and the demon knew that the priest would see Reagan struggling like this and talk to Father Karras about it and start making those roads converge a little bit.
Absolutely. I think that's a great analysis. I think that's a great way to
I
think
chew
about
on
it.
this shit and I talk on my ass. That's how I do
That's right. He talks out his ass. So yeah, that's a good explanation. So that happens. Chris Baser puts her to bed, and then she goes downstairs. She's like, "Oh my gosh, like can't believe that happened." Blah 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, she hears some noises upstairs. And this brings up a point that I didn't bring up earlier that I think is really hilarious. Is that in before all this starts to kick off, you know, we start to hear some weird noises in the attic,
it. The
and
rats.
yeah, and I'm not talking like a creaking board here or there like an old house does. I'm talking like
Yeah,
like
they're
sounds like
fighting up there.
sounds like somebody's running with two cinder blocks on their feet, and she's like, "Hey, uh, there's rats up there. I need you to take care of it." And he's like, "There's no rats." It's like, what kind of rats do you have in this house? They must be like the
Are those
Teenage Mutant
fists?
it must. I mean, I don't know. I just think that's funny. And then she goes up there eventually and checks it out, and she sees the rat traps haven't been touched. She's like, "Oh, these aren't rats." She's like, "Yeah, I told you. They're not
Yeah.
rats. We have a demon in this house."
We ain't got rats, lady. I'm sorry. You gotta call someone
Exactly.
else.
So I thought that was funny. But after she puts her to bed, she hears noises upstairs and she runs upstairs, and the bed is like kind of shaking a little bit. And she is like, "Oh my God, like, this is I've never seen anything like this." So then we go, and this is where we get to the scenes where I honestly, when I say this, this might be the most horrific part of this movie for me.
Hmm.
We get to these scenes where she takes Reagan to the doctor. And there's a lot of reasons why I like this scene because
You
before we
cringed in the theater. I remember this part.
dude, I am bad. I'm not bad with gore,
Or
but when
blood.
it I first off, I'm not good at giving blood. Like if I ever get sick, like, "Hey, we need to take your blood," I'm like, "Okay, I'm out. I'm out." I've never been good at it. I've passed out multiple times with it. I'm bad at it. But when it comes to like gory stuff, if like someone's getting stabbed and all, it because over the top for me. When it's
Yeah.
realistic, like someone getting a shot or needles or drawing blood, that's it for me.
Ugh.
I can't do that. And so we're going to get into it here, but there's a couple reasons I like this scene or these scenes because before we get to the Exorcist stuff, no one's just like, "Oh my God, she's acting crazy. She's possessed," as if someone would in a movie in 2023. Like, "Oh, she's possessed. Duh."
Jump right to it.
They run through all these tests to try to figure out what's going on. And that's great because if you have ever been sick with something before and you've gone to the doctor and they just can't figure out, maybe they've taken blood, they've run you through CAT scans, they run you through x-rays, they've done this, they've done that. "Hey, we can't figure out what's going on. I'm sorry." That's a scary feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And to see them go through all these hula hoops and these hoops to try to figure out what is going on with this girl, and they keep trying to come up with explanations for modern science and medicine. It's interesting to see them go down the list and try to figure it out. It's very realistic.
Yeah, and you're right because most modern movies would just jump to possession in the second act. Most modern movies would just like be like, "Oh, if the Ritalin doesn't work, have you tried demonic possession?" They would skip a whole bunch of steps. They wouldn't try the psychiatrist route. They wouldn't be in the denial that the doctors are in. It's a very long and drawn out debate. And this whole this whole B story of her going back to the doctor and back to the doctor and figuring out what's wrong. The doctors are wrong. Doctor doesn't want to admit that they're wrong. The whole thing is so drawn out. It's frustrating, first of all, because it's realistic. And if you're in the U.S., they charge you $5,000 along the way. But they refuse. They refuse to admit that they're wrong. And by the time they finally like, all right, it's time to consider psychiatry. Even that's wrong. So you get this frustrating ordeal, this journey that the mother has to go on just to figure this out. It it's another example of losing faith and turning away from beliefs. I mean, you have these beliefs that it's a medical issue. The doctors are turning away from that. The mother is turning away from that. Losing faith, I think, is the big story here. Losing faith in what you believe you know to be true. Losing faith. That if I had two words to sum up what this movie's about, it's about losing faith. And the demon is the catalyst for all this. And it takes a very long time to get to even get to her and Father Karras connecting. They don't even connect till the third act here. So yeah, it's a very long and arduous process, and that is all intentional, both from a filmmaking perspective. You want to feel that frustration and that drag, but also intentional on behalf of the demon. He's making that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they, and I could be saying it wrong, but I think they call it an angiograph. I don't know if that's correct.
What with the shot?
The procedure that they do with like the neck and the stuff.
I missed it. I missed what it's called. The bottom line is they put a thick ass needle in your neck.
They're like, look, we think it could be something like a lesion on her brain, so we got to put her through this thing. And I could be pronouncing it wrong. I apologize, but dude, they show the whole thing, and like I said, I am not good with needles. That's the number one. Dude, they start like lubing her up, and they put and then the blood starts squirting out, and it's just so realistic. It's not over the top like someone's like getting stabbed, and it's like it's just it's realistic, like you were there watching this happen. And I think they might have used some real medical doctors in this. As a matter of fact, I got a piece of trivia for you. I don't know if you know it or not, but you have to go back and watch it because I can't remember which specific guy it was off the top of my head. One of the doctors in this movie that has like a quick line, he says, "Oh, everything's going to be okay." He would later go on to become a murderer and kill someone and get like 20 years in prison.
Well, like for real?
Yes, for real.
Like a real life murderer?
I'm dead ass. Look it up. His name's Paul Bateson. He's a convicted murderer and former actor, he was an actual radiographer, the role that he did. And in a couple years after the film, he killed a journalist and got 20 years in prison. And they tried to blame him for a bunch of other stuff. His backstory is pretty wild. So there actually was like a murderer that was an actor on the set of The Exorcist. That just adds to, that's like probably the biggest piece of like, what the fuck?
Wow, dude. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to throw Exorcist curse at that, but holy shit. I mean,
that's wild.
That's pretty serious. And those murders, took place after The Exorcist?
Yep.
I mean, obviously, right?
Yep, after The Exorcist. Look into it after we get done. It's pretty wild.
The Exorcist curse is real, man. I'm telling you.
It is real. So, and yeah, like I mentioned, where the blood squirting out, she's running through these tests and these machines, this isn't 2023 where, you can go get a CAT scan and, or some sort of whatever scan, and it's not as loud. Dude, these machines look like they came out of like World War II, and they're like dun, 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 and they're making loud noises, and it's just and she's sitting there and the things are going around and she's just like, oh my god, like she's just a little girl like crying, and then they're watching from the room above, and her mom's like, oh my god, just the suffering and the things she goes through just for these tests. It's brutal, man. And to me, that's some of the most brutal stuff of the movie. And actually, I think that is some of the scenes where people actually passed out the most. I think I read.
I could see that. I could see the passing out from the needle. You're right. The blood spurting, super realistic. It looked like they actually punctured. So yeah, I'm not sensitive to needles and blood and stuff like that or surgical equipment, but I could see people passing out to that for sure because it was a very real scene.
Absolutely. And so that for me, I mean, that really took it over the top for me. So let's see, I've got some pulled up here. So as that happens, they're running these tests, like, look, we can't find anything wrong. At first, they give her Ritalin. I think it's some sort of thing with her frontal lobe or something. I don't know. It's not. They bring her back for more tests. They run this. There's no lesions on the brain. And, at some point in this, she's like, look, like I told you, the bed was rattling. And they're like, oh, well, sometimes you can kind of, manifest that. I'm like, dude, you ain't manifesting a
The
bed
denial,
shaking.
dude.
Okay.
Yeah.
You ain't manifesting that. I understand you can't come up with any answers, but I would just be like, I don't know what to tell you. I'll be honest with you. You might need to buy some chains and strap that thing down to the floor. I don't know.
Have you tried earthquakes?
Exactly. So, after we have all this stuff happen, she's going through these tests, all this stuff. And we kind of go back to Father Karras, and he's taking care of his mom. And eventually she becomes sick, and they have to put her in this kind of old hospital, maybe a mental hospital, something. I don't know. It's a very rundown place. Now, apparently, when they film that scene where he goes in to see her, that's actually like a real like hospital, and they snuck a camera in there, and they didn't. I don't think they let them know they were in there, and so those people, they're like the people that are kind of insane and not all there. That's real. That's not actors. That's real.
How do you hide a camera in 1973? Those things are
I
like the size of computers.
I don't know. That's just what I heard and read.
Wow.
So all that stuff's real, and it adds to it. And he goes and sees his mom, and she's really like kind of on her last leg, and she's kind of like mad and upset. And he's like, Mom, I'm sorry. And she's like, it's just it's sad to watch. And it's eventually later, and I think the next scene after, his mom would go on to pass away. And that's just another thing that just adds to it. And he's like, man, all this is happening, and now, my mom's dead. He feels guilty. He couldn't be there for her, and it just adds another thing to his list.
Yeah, and I think that's the final nail in the coffin that really turns him away from priesthood and religion. I think we don't. I don't think we see him in his robes after that up until the ending. So I think that's what finally does it. He lost faith. Maybe he felt like his occupation was taking him away from her, and that was the reason for it. But yeah, she passes away, and that has a huge impact on him.
Absolutely. So he's kind of losing it, and that's where we're at with that. Now we get to this other scene. This is where things start to pick up even more. They run these tests. They can't figure out what's going on. They bring her home. The bed starts rattling. Things start popping off. They call the doctors. They're like, hey, can you please come? She's acting bad again. He's like, well, did you give her medicine? He's like, that Ritalin. It ain't helping. All right. It ain't helping. And they go upstairs, and this scene in 1973, bruh.
Could you imagine asking the mom, "Did you give her Ritalin?" And then walking in the room and seeing plates fly against the wall? You're like, "Oh, well, that's not it then."
You're seeing all this stuff, and it's just absolutely bonkers. And she's losing her mind, and she starts, and I could be getting some of this wrong. I apologize, but this does eventually happen where she's using a crucifix to do some stuff.
What's she doing? Describe to me what she's doing.
What's that scene in Family Guy where Stewie tries to get Brian? He's like, I'll do it, but you have to like grab your tail and like lick your tail.
Use your pointer and your thumb to grip the base of your tail gently. Oh my god, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So in the book, this always confused me. In the book, apparently she's using the cross to make herself feel good. In the movie, I always took it as she was stabbing herself with it. That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, I mean, it
I,
literally it is what it is.
yeah,
It is stabbing. Obviously the placement of it, it's intentional. It's supposed to be edgy. It's supposed to be risque and very antichrist, and
correct.
it it is stabbing, but it is what you think it is too. So I don't think the movie indulged itself on explaining it that well, because you're kind of writing in a book and is one thing, you know what I mean? So even though we are getting taboo with it, we're not getting that taboo with it. So yeah, no, I think it is exactly at least symbolic stabbing at the best. I don't know about the book explanation. I mean, if that's the case, that's the case. But holy shit, you know, no wonder they left that out the movie. But yeah, that's probably one of the edgiest scenes too. I can't imagine any grandmother liking that scene.
No, absolutely not. And that's one of the scenes, and then the doctor comes in and he's like, "So we're gonna give you these shot." She grabs him and just smacks him. It's great. He's like, "Oh my god, I was not expecting that."
Oh, it's not the Ritalin. Oh,
It's not the Ritalin. So that happens, and she's like going up and down on the bed, and it's cool, and it's crazy to see. And then we have, she's doing the thing with the cross, and then she throws it, and then she grabs her mom by the head and shoves her face in between her legs, and it's all bloody, and she comes up. I mean, that dude in the 70s, I could only imagine what people were thinking when they saw that. I mean, just bonkers.
yeah. I mean, say what you want about society and how much we've changed. It right now that's just like weird at best, but in the '70s, unheard of, unheard of, dude. I mean, you were a few decades removed from a generation of people who would cover the legs of pianos because they thought it was too risque. You know what I mean? So to get there, you got to think
Exactly.
about that, man.
Exactly. It's nuts. And seeing that happen, and the doctors are their minds are blown. She's doing all this stuff with the cross. She's throwing her mom, and also apparently, during those scenes where Reagan was up and down on the bed, they had some sort of contraption, kind of laid on her, strapped to her, so they could do that. She suffered a lot of back pain in her life,
I bet.
Linda Blair, from that. And also in that scene where Chris McNeil gets thrown, excuse me, gets thrown on the floor. I've got it played up here on YouTube right now. You see, and when she smacks her and she gets thrown like on the floor, it's really like hard. Well, apparently during this scene, Friedkin was like telling the stunt guy, they had something strapped to her back. It was like, "Hey, you're not pulling her hard enough." But for her, she was like, "You're pulling me too hard. Can you lighten up? You're kind of hurting me a little bit." And so Freakin's like, "The next time she does it, I want you to pull like 10 times harder." He's kind of a dick, like on scene,
Mm-hmm.
but he got it right. And he pulled her back on that scene, and that's the scene they use, and she had permanent long-term back pain due to that.
Oh, nah.
So, and if
Fuck
you go
that.
back and watch that scene, I mean, she smacks that floor really hard. Like it's like a
Yeah, that's I didn't know about that. Did she sue for that? She must have.
I don't know if she sued. I think back then it was one of those commonplace, like, hey, the director was like kind of being an asshole to like get things done in the right way.
Hmm.
And yeah. And then we also get the scene after that, she gets pulled down. She brings the dresser drawer, and it almost falls on her, and then the door is closing, and then we get the scene where Chris is crawling away, and then we get the one of the many infamous scenes, the head
Yeah.
turns, and it's like that scene never really did much for me. I always thought it was hokey until I saw it in theaters on the big screen. When that happened, I was like, wow.
Yeah, dude.
Wow.
They built a scale model replica of Linda Blair, and they did that. And yeah, it's not the body horror of John Carpenter 10 years later, but this is '73, man. You don't do that. So yeah, it nailed it. That's iconic. The head turning around and potentially, most likely, snapping the neck. That's synonymous with the theme of The Exorcist. I mean, if you see that happen in any movie, comedy or not, where someone's head turns 180 degrees, first thing you think of is Exorcist.
Correct. Absolutely. So, and you bring that up, the head. twisting. I think we forgot to mention a little bit earlier. We mentioned the Burke Dennings guy. Well, there was a situation that happened where apparently they were all back at the house hanging out, and then the butler, the guests, and Chris and all them, they had to go somewhere, so they left Burke to look after Reagan. Well, they leave, they come back later on that night. There's a bunch of cops, there's all this stuff going on outside, and they're like, "Well, what happened to Burke?" And then this guy comes in. You're like, "Well, didn't you hear?" He's like, "No, like he's dead." And so it's kind of like, huh, like he died. I don't know. It's kind of strange. Well, come to find out, it looks like those infamous stairs that are next to the house, kind of next to the window, kind of near that area. Maybe he got pushed out of those stairs or pushed out of that window, fell down the stairs, neck snapped, turned it around. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, it's pretty obvious, you know. The the detective, Kinnaman is his
Kinderman.
name. Kinderman.
Kinderman. Mhm.
Kinderman explains to Father Karras maybe a little later in the movie that that yeah, his body tumbled down the stairs, but his head was turned completely backwards and snapped. And you know, Karras asked a logical question: what's the chance that that happened while he was falling down the stairs? Kinnaman doesn't have an answer, but he has suspicions. So it's pretty heavily implied that his head was turned around and then he was thrown down the stairs. I mean, 50 years later, man, let's call it what it is. Obviously, Reagan did that.
Right.
Kinnaman commented about how it takes the strength of a full grown man, or not even the strength of a full grown man could do that. So, um, never had any mystery to me. It's pretty obvious what that is. I don't
Correct.
think we need to dwell on that, you know, as a movie or even maybe even as a book. You don't need to dwell on that. It's pretty obvious that the demon did it.
It insists upon itself.
It insists upon itself.
So you bring up Kinderman. A lot of people are kind of 50-50 on his character. I've seen some people say, hey, I think he's just shoehorned in there. I don't really think he adds to the film. Then you have people like me. I love his character. I think he is a detective. I love his personality. He's very sly. He's playful. He's trying to get information about this murder. And he senses something is off within this house. So we've got like three like plots going on in this movie. We've got the detective, we got Father Karras, and then we've got the possession. So you've got like three things going on in this movie.
Yeah, Kinderman probably has the least screen time out of any of the main characters. Kinderman is a great actor. He acted great. He, I kind of expected him to be more of like an antagonistic force, like trying to point the fingers, whatever, or something. But as the end progressed, he really didn't play as big a role as I think maybe he does in the book. I'm sure. Um, but the role that he does play is he goes from this, and this is probably one of the more underdeveloped aspects of the movie is Kinderman's role. But I can tell right away that his role is he's introduced as this, you know, snarky, set in his way detective who thinks he knows, but really he has no idea. And at the end of the movie, he finds out that he has no idea. And that harkens back to the theme that I said that this movie was all about, which is losing faith and losing your trust in what you think you know. The being deceived, losing faith. You know, Karras loses faith in God, and the mom loses faith in medicine, and Kinderman loses faith in fact, you know. So
Right.
he's scratching his head most of the movie. Doesn't really crack the case or anything like that, but you can tell that he's working on it.
Absolutely. So I love his character. I think it's great, and he kind of dives into more stuff in the film. We have the scene where he's talking to Father Karras, kind of questioning about earlier. There was a scene where the church was kind of desecrated a little bit. He kind of asks him about that, and then he talks to Chris, and he's like kind of implying that maybe your daughter pushed this guy down the stairs, blah 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 blah. So he's kind of tagging the situation along. And I like his character because he really, he doesn't just pressure. He's like, tell me what. He's not like Batman. He's like, swear to me. He's very, he's very like sly and tries to get information in a fun way and not antagonize the person.
His mind isn't set in stone. He's open to ideas, but he doesn't want to believe it.
Correct. So we have that happen, and then we've got all the stuff going on, and eventually she's like, "Look, we need to see a psychiatrist. Like we get there's something going on here. It's not medical, maybe it's mental." And you know, there's a scene. I don't really need to get into the scene but we get into it, and we've kind of had the Father Karras character, and Chris and Reagan. They've kind of been off in their own separate worlds, but they get ready to come together and meet. And Chris is like, "Look, I need to find a psychiatrist, somebody." She's like, "Well, have you tried Father Karras? He's with the church. He's a good guy. All this stuff." So goes, does this. She's like, "I need you." She's like, you know, "I need you to come see my daughter." He's like, "Well, I can't come see her as like a priest. I don't know if like she's kind of mentions like could be something demonic going on." He's like, "But can you come, check her out?" And I just love it when she's like, "So how do you go about getting an exorcism?"
And he's like,
He's like, what?" He's like, "I know as much about exorcisms as you probably do.
he's like, oh, now the point of the conversation comes out. Okay, I got you.
You didn't actually want to talk to me. You just wanted me to perform an exorcism on your daughter."
I got you. Okay, but before we get to this point though, us go back to Kinderman because I something just clicked with me while you were talking. Kinderman is kind of, and again, a little underdeveloped, but Kinderman is kind of the bridging aspect between Karras's road and the families. Kinderman is the common denominator between where those two are at that point in time.
Correct.
Kinderman talked to Karras, obviously, and then he talked to Reagan and her mother, or Reagan's mother at least. So when Karras is finally seen later on that night or whatever, going into the house, Kinderman's scratching his head in the car. He's seeing some kind of weird connection there. But one thing I like that I didn't catch until this movie theater viewing. Do you remember in the kitchen when her mother gave Kinderman a cup of coffee or whatever, and he was like looking at the plants, and he picked up the little clay thing that she made. He was like, "Is your daughter the artist?"
Correct.
And she goes, "Yes, yeah, whatever." And they shoot the breeze a little bit. Do you know what that was about?
No.
Seems like a nothing thing. Think earlier to the so the whole reason that I'm piecing the sentences together as I'm thinking of it because it's just popped up. Kinderman went to see Father Karras because Burke was killed,
Correct.
but the reason he went to Karras is because he thinks that it was some kind of witchcraft thing and possibly related to the desecration in the church that we saw in that glimpse moment.
Correct.
So that's where that connection is. That desecration in the church, you have the statue of, I think, the Virgin Mary. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
These giant honkers and what is clearly some kind of phallic growth, right? Coming from the statue. Desecration, right? A
Correct.
lewd, vulgar desecration in the church. It's a blink and you'll miss it, but what do you remember about the desecration? What do you remember about looking at that statue? What do you remember seeing?
I remember the things were like black, and there was like some red
Mhm.
drawings. Uh well,
I don't.
I get what you're getting at. I get what you're saying. I'm
The
start.
attachments made to the statue were made out of clay,
Mm,
the same clay that Reagan uses as an artist.
that's
The same
right.
the same clay that Reagan likes to mold things with. I think there was another scene in the beginning where she's like making animals out of clay or whatever. So Kinderman, the desecration of the church was made out of clay. So when he sees the clay sculpture that Reagan made, he's asking, "Oh, is your daughter the artist?" He doesn't give a shit about her clay.
No.
He goes, "Oh my God, there's the connection right there. A murder comes from your window, and here's the same clay used desecrating the church. My suspicions were correct." So one of those blink and you'll miss it moments, man, but everything is intentional. And this is why you get the book author to write the screenplay.
I love it. I love it. And I knew the connection you were putting together there because I knew they had that conversation to kind of bridge it, but putting it together like that's great. And that's why I like Kinderman's character even more because He's just a solid character to bridge them together. It's
It
great.
is.
Great writing.
Yeah, the great writing. There's no useless conversation in this movie. Every single conversation furthers the plot, and that's what a good movie should do.
No, it's great. I love it. So eventually we get to this scene where she's like, will you please come see my daughter? He's like, sure. And this is where we get the first meeting between Father Karras, our character 1A, and then character 1B, Reagan. And he walks into the room, and I got to tell you, I don't know, I don't care who you are. If I walked into a room and was like, oh, this girl's probably just like crazy or whatever, I walk into the room and I see this girl all cut up with green ooze cuts on her face, looking like she just came out of like a toxic waste dump with a food tube up her nose, looking like that. And he just walks in, he's like, hey.
Hey, how's it going?
It's like, it just doesn't even faze him. I'm like, dude, she is possessed. There's no doubt about it. This has nothing to do with being like mentally ill. This has to do with like, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, and it pretty hard to overlook the immediate appearance you see. You could make the conversation that that is Father Karras, who doesn't want to admit, because admitting that there is a demonic presence is admitting that there is a God, and admitting that he shouldn't have turned away from his faith. So he doesn't want to believe. He wants to say, there's I can see her as a psychiatrist, but not as a priest. He wants to believe that it's all in her mind. So he's in denial about what he's seeing.
Absolutely. And I love that. And he's in there, he's kind of talking to her, questioning, and he's asking her questions. He's like, how long do you plan to stay in her? She's like, till she rots in the earth and dies and all this stuff. And then we get this really good scene where he's like, he's like, if you'd like to leave a message for your mother, let me know. And I'm like, and he's just kind of like, oh, what the fuck did you just say? And that's like when he starts to really pick up on like this could be something, because how did this girl know that my mom just died? She would have no idea. And he's like, what's my mom's maiden name or something like that? And like, he doesn't say anything. And I love that, because it's the psychology of the devil, the demon, not letting him know that it's there, but not giving him all the answers. Not just coming flat out and say, yeah, I'm a demon that just possessed this girl. Like, what are you going to do about it? Still making him question it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And the demon withholding the answers, even though the demon is perfectly capable of getting that answer, even though the demon probably knows the answer, withholding the answer furthers Father Karras's belief that is a psychology issue and not a religious issue. Maybe he just misheard him about her
Correct.
about his mom. But if the demon had given, he's like, well, you must know the mother's maiden name. If the demon had given the maiden name, Father Karras would have immediately been like, possession, you're possessed. Let's get this going. He would have had certainty. But the demon doesn't want Father Karras to have certainty. He wants Father Karras turned away from God. So he keeps that mystery about him, even though he could give him the satisfaction of answering the question.
Fantastic writing. Great stuff.
Yep.
And they're going at it, and they're kind of talking, and then he kind of gets up, and this is when we get the infamous throw up scene where she throws up green pea soup all over him. And this is well known, but I'm gonna put it out there just because I love the trivia about movies. That scene, that's a one take scene. They did not, the actor Jason Miller, he did not expect that to hit him in the face. It was supposed to just hit him in the chest, and it hit him in the face, and he has the absolute like disgusted look on his face, because he had no idea that that was going to hit him in the face, and apparently he was really pissed off about it after that.
I bet.
But the scene, it worked great. It looked great.
Yeah, he kept character, and I wouldn't be surprised if Friedkin was the one that said, "Aim it a little higher."
Exactly, because that just seems to be the type of thing that he would do.
Yeah.
So we get this. They have their first encounter. He goes downstairs. He's like, I don't know. I think she just needs help. Blah 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 blah. And so we get this, and he's still not convinced. Still kind of talking about it, but he comes back for a second conversation. And this is when it kind of gets amped up even more. Now, there is something that we didn't mention earlier, but I'm going to mention now because there are multiple cuts of this movie. There's the theater cut, there's the director. I don't know. There's like 3 different cuts of this movie. And then in the year 2000, they came out with the version that you've never seen, which I think that's the version we saw in theaters.
Yes.
And it does have the infamous spider walk in it, where she comes down the stairs. And I'm glad we picked up on that before we got further. I've seen people say they don't like this scene. I love that scene. I think it's just balls out weird. Like, just imagine like you're just sitting like in your living room and all of a sudden you just see this like and then like blood starts. I'd be like, what the is that? In the theater, it made it so much better. I loved it. I really did.
The sound design captivated right off the bat. You could hear the footsteps well before she came down the stairs. You heard the footsteps coming while the mom was still delivering her lines. So something was starting to happen. You probably would have picked that up if you were just watching the TV. But I talked in the beginning about this, where about how I got goosebumps in the theaters. That was the scene. That was the scene that gave me goosebumps. Now, I have seen some weird contortionist shit before. Okay, I've seen freaky body horror imagery and mangled corpses, like practical or not. Like, I've seen that before, and there wasn't anything inherently revolutionary about Reagan walking backwards like a crab.
Mhm.
Yeah, for the 70s, it was awesome, and going down the stairs, hey, props to you. But there was just something about the timing of that moment where the mom was devastated about finding out about Burke dying,
Yes.
and you hear the well before she gets down the stairs. Like, you hear that. It doesn't just cut to it. It goes for a nanosecond in the theater. I was like, what the fuck is that noise? And she comes down the stairs, and the spider walk has never hit really well for me because I was always kind of just like, whatever. But the rapid footsteps and that happening, and then the immediate cut to the real blood pouring out of her mouth upside down. That was, I think my favorite moment in the whole movie is the spider walk with the blood. And it took seeing it in the theater to really appreciate it, but that might be the highlight of the movie to me because that part gave me goosebumps.
You're right. And everything you just said about that it wasn't even necessarily the spider walk, it was the setup because you just had the guy saying, hey, Burke's dead, and she's like, what, can anything get any worse? Like, this sucks. She's crying. And then you hit it perfect, nail on the head. Maybe you might not catch it if you've got a good sound system at home, maybe you can catch it, but watch it in theaters. Just hearing that like where she's like going down the stairs and you don't see it and you're like, what the hell is that? And you turn around and you see the mom. They do a lot of good shots of Chris, like with her reaction, like seeing stuff before you see what actually happened, and it makes it so much more effective. And just hearing that build up for just that half a second before you see it, it's like, what is that? You turn around, you're like, oh my god, like it hits perfect.
Yeah, and the scare factor in that was not just the imagery in the spider walk, it was the timing, and it was how engrossed you were in the movie at that point in time. I mean,
Correct.
very dialogue heavy section. You're very like gripping the edge of your seat, trying to see like really tense stuff. And you're right. It's like, what else could go wrong? Boom, you're hit with this, and you weren't ready for a supernatural eeriness in this moment, but that's what you got. So, oh my god, it timing. I don't think there's a better timed scary moment in horror history. I can't think of one right now.
You're right, and that again, that's what makes this film so good. Is that if this happened in a movie in 2023, it would be boom. Look at this spider walk. Isn't that scary? And
It
then
would be expected. They would set it up as like a fake out jump scare where it's like, "Whoa," and she opens the door and nothing happens. She's like, oh, oof, okay. And then she turns around and scary thing. It'd be a fake out jump scare, like all the movies do. But here, no jump scare. It's just happening.
it just happens, and everything that has been built up to this point, you're not even worried about that. You're so focused on what they're talking about, and then it's just boom. I love it. So yes, great stuff there. Um, And so we get another visit between Karis and Reagan. And if you stay with us till this point, we're about an hour, almost 2 hours into this thing. I promise we're trying to get through it as fast as we can, but we have to talk about this stuff. We got to get it all out there.
It deserves if no other movie deserves a treatment like this.
No. So, we're going through this, and Karis comes back, and this time he's recording a conversation between the two because in order to get permission from the church for an exorcism, he has to have proof, talking in tongues, speaking in a language that they don't know, or this person has never been able to speak before, such as someone that's never been to, speak in Latin whenever you're a 9-year-old girl living
Right.
in America. You're not going to know that. So he's having this conversation with her, and I love the scene where he sits down and she opens the drawer with like her mind, and then he's like, he's like, "Did you do that?" And she's like, "Yeah." And then he's like, "Do it again." She's like, "No." He's like, "Do it again." He's like, "No."
Nah, I'm
The
not gonna
devil
do
is
it.
like playing tricks. I like that. It's interesting. This scene here I love because he takes holy water, but it's not actually holy water. It's just regular tap water. And he throws it on her, and she starts reacting the typical, like, as any demon would to holy water. And it starts making all these sounds and noises, all this stuff. And I love it because whenever he comes out, he's like, I threw holy water on your daughter. Too bad it wasn't holy water. And she reacted. And he's like, oh man, like, I guess she's not really possessed. But the devil is outsmarting him because the devil knows it's not holy water and is reacting in a way to kind of trip him up. And I love that.
Mhm.
You might not pick up on it the first time you see it. Maybe you do, because I'm not really catching things all the time. But when I picked up on that, I was like, that is great psychology. That is great.
Yeah, that tripped me up for many, many years. I was just like, what's the whole point about the tap water thing? I don't get why is she reacting to tap water? And I always took it at face value. You're right. He's pretending to be the demon is pretending that it's Reagan reacting to holy water if she thinks it's holy water, just to instill more doubt in Father Karras. And also the thing he said before about this thing possessing your daughter doesn't say it's a demon; it says it's the devil himself. That's like saying that I'm Napoleon Bonaparte or whatever.
Correct.
It just more things to to make Father Karras believe that it's all in Reagan's mind. It's not actually a possession. I've seen this mirrored. I've seen this mirrored in other movies. I'm thinking about. I think it's the last Exorcism. They did something like this, and they paid homage to it, to where the possessing entity made a mistake, and the priest was like, "Oh, you're just the victim pretending to be." I got you. Okay. So always confused me in that one too. But yeah, man, that's some deep layer shit. That is some book author shit. So it's you don't get that with a regular screenplay, man. You get that when the author of the book writes your screenplay.
Exactly. Great stuff. I love it. I love it. It's not even the scary stuff in the film that I love. I love that stuff, but it's the
It's
things
the
like
writing.
it's the writing, man. That's what makes it great. And so he goes back, and Karras has got these tapes now that he's got up, and he's listening back, and you can hear, if you pay attention to some of the stuff it's saying, it's like the devil saying like, I am no one, and it's also saying like Marin, like Father Marin. It's saying
Yeah.
Father Marin's name because of what happened in the beginning of the film. And it's great because in this scene, and this is the scene, the jump scare that got you, which I told you how they pulled it off, which is fantastic. Uh, he's sitting there, he's in his little room, and he's listening to the tapes, and he's just sitting there listening, and then you just get this scene where the phone rings, and it zooms in on his face, and he like turns around. But it's such a good jump scare because it gets your attention. But the way they pulled that scene off is that William Freakin, again, in his, maybe not things that would not fly in 2023, but on set, he had a gun, and it wasn't a loaded gun. He had blanks in it. But when he would want a specific reaction from the actors to get their attention, he would do that. So when they got the reaction of the jump scare of the phone ringing, he fired that blank gun and it made the actor Father Karras, Jason Miller, turn around and like, what was that? Like if you heard a gunshot actually pop off. So that's how you got that genuine jump scare reaction.
Yeah, dude. The whole movie's a one-two punch of good writing and good directing. Unethical at times, maybe,
Mhm.
but it a hardcore, and there's a lot of passion that goes into it. A lot of love for the craft. That gun thing, I didn't know about that until you told me. That makes so much sense. And that's the moment that scared me was the phone ringing. It wasn't even a gun. It was just a loud phone sound effect. And then it made me jump, and I haven't been jump scared in 13 years. So yeah, man, that was God, God, I love this movie, man. It's so good.
Absolutely. So, and I could be wrong when I say this, and maybe they cut this out. I'm not sure. I feel like I've seen a part of this movie where he brings the materials to the church, and they're like, "No, we're not doing this." And I feel like in the movie that we saw, they were just like, "Okay, yeah, we'll do it." Am I wrong? Is this a Mandela effect I got going on? I could be wrong.
I That sounds vaguely familiar. I also don't remember the church being so on board with it either. Um, Vaguely familiar. I kind of expected a little bit more resistance from the church, but I don't know.
I could be wrong. Maybe it's
That makes too much sense, though. What you just described, I'm questioning myself now because
yeah,
I think it is
because
Mandela effect.
the way that Father Karras goes about it, he's like, they're not going to approve this no matter what I
Right?
do. And he brings it to them. They're like, okay, yeah, we'll do
Yeah, they're on board with it.
it. So I could be wrong. Maybe I am right. I need to look into it more. I can't remember. Maybe there's a different version of the film. Um, so he gets the approval. They're like, all right, well, who are we going to get to do this? He's like, well, we need someone like with you to do it. And so that's where we get Father Marin from the beginning of the film. So they call him in. And dude, this is where we get like the iconic like poster of the movie where the taxi cab's like bringing him into the house and he like gets out and like the light from the window is like shining on him and it's like his black silhouette and
Such a good shot.
we get the tubular bells. Da, 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 oh, whew, it's get ready to go down.
Yeah, dude.
And it's and they open the door and you see his silhouette and you're like, yeah, it's getting
Yeah.
ready to go down. So that
Now, here's the thing. Father Marin is the one character whose placement in the movie I'm still kind of scratching my head about. I mean, why did we get that whole Iraq sequence in the beginning? I mean, I get it, it worked in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, he found the artifact's head, so the demon latched onto him, but he's across the planet. I mean, how why Father Marin? What is the connection there? Is it Father Karras? Is it the story about Father Karras just disconnected that far? But Father Marin's placement in all this confuses me still.
so apparently in the now I could be wrong. I'm sure there's a more out rational explanation, a correct explanation, but I'm going to try to put it together the best I can. In the film, they say Father Marin has performed an exorcist before, so therefore they ask him to do it again. And
Mm,
also, he has experience kind of in this field. They said, I think in the film they said that the one he did lasted months or days or hours. I can't remember, something like that. They said he's done it before, and I they expand on this in the prequel Dominion, or I can't remember what it is. It's like the fourth film in the franchise. They do a prequel to The Exorcist where it shows what he went through while he was in Iraq, I believe. So obviously that would be 30, 40 years later till they would come out with that movie. But I'm sure there's a more concrete reason that I'm not picking up on right now. I'm sure if you look into it, you'll get it. But
I,
that's kind of what there's a couple pieces that are there.
I think you just answered my question, honestly, because now I'm thinking back to the second visitation that Father Karras had to where the demon said, "Nice day for an exorcism, huh?" And Karras was like, "Oh, it sounds like you want that. Why would you want that?" And the demon was like, "To bring me and you closer." So
Right.
I think you're right. I think you just answered that long-standing question I had. Why Father Marin? Well, because he's done exorcisms before, and he can exorcise this demon into Father Karras like the demon wants.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, I'm gonna go with that. You just answered my question.
And then also, like I said a little bit earlier, when you play the tapes back, when she's like talking, she says Marin, and I think the demon knows that they have some sort of previous history together. Maybe when he did that Exorcist a couple years ago or whenever, it was the same demon. They have some sort of history. It's not like fully like put out there, but they have some sort
Okay.
of connection.
Okay. All right. Now, okay. Now it's starting to click into place more. Now the Iraq sequence makes a little bit more sense. The idea that they have history, and this might be one of those underdeveloped things that's maybe more developed in the book, but the idea that the demon has history with Marin and it's trying to subliminally hint to Karis that Marin is the key to exercising, but the
Correct.
demon wants. Okay. It's falling into place now. Chef's kiss. Beautiful. I need to read this book, man. I need to read the book.
Same. So do I. I need to read it. So this is it. This is the final showdown. This is the title of the film. This is where the actual exorcism happens, and you've got Father Marin, you've got Father Karras, and I love the build up because they're like getting ready. They're putting the robes on and doing all this stuff, and Father Karras is like telling him, he's like, I think you need to know the backstory. This is the research I've done. He's like, no, there's only one evil. It's the devil. He's like, I don't need all that crap. He's like, I know what I'm doing. And I love it because he tells him, he's like, look, the devil will lie. It will say things that are not true. It will try to make you believe things and trick you. He's like, you got to stay the path. Do not listen to the devil. And of course, he doesn't. But he tells him, he's like, do not listen. Just go in there and do what we need to do. And then we're going to get out.
Yeah, and they do what they got to do, and the devil tries what he's got to try. Now, this whole scene, the whole movie, this long ass movie, has been building towards this sequence. It's called The Exorcist. It's time for the exorcism. This movie, everything has been building towards this. Now, if this movie was made in the 2020s, you would have this B plot going on outside with like the mom or something and rushing against some kind of ticking clock. And this whole exorcism sequence would begin and it would cut to the B plot. And we'd cut back to the exorcism going on and cut back to the B plot. But this movie does one of the most underappreciated things, and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't leave the room where this is happening. There is no outside world around what is happening here because the whole reason you're here watching this is for this sequence. That gravity is there. It what you've been building towards, it's finally happening. We are not cutting away from shit. This is what we're here for. This sequence is going to be 14 minutes long and there is not a sound to be heard outside of this bedroom. You get that right away. It feels like you're like a modern example would be like the end of Joker, where he's on the Murray show, and that whole sequence, there's nothing going outside of this room. This is what we've been building towards. This is how we're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel that gravity, and you're kind of just glued to your chair by the gravity alone. Like you don't want to like your eyes are peeled, no camera cuts, nothing. You are inside this room. You are in this moment. You are going to feel every second. There is no dead seconds in this whole sequence.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of things that happen in this sequence. They start the exorcism, and they're throwing the holy water. They're saying and this I tell you what, I don't know how long this actual scene goes until they like actually step out of the room for a little bit. It feels like this thing drags on for hours. Like
It's at least 10 minutes.
you feel like tired watching it. It just feels
Mm-hmm.
so realistic. Like you're in there going through this with them, and they're going through this exorcism, and you just feel like exhausted by the time they get finished with the first part. You're like, oh my god, they're not even like done. You feel tired.
Exactly. Yeah, you feel tired because all your focus is in on this moment. The passage of time, there is no lost time in this sequence. You're watching from the moment they enter the room to the moment they exit the room. You see every second. Whereas some other movies, you only see glimpses here and there. It cuts back and forth and good editing. But you're right.
Correct.
You feel tired at the end of this. It drains your energy. it's and it's supposed to feel like that. You really feel like you're witnessing an actual exorcism going on.
Absolutely. And this is, we get so many iconic scenes within this scene, iconic moments within the scene.
Mm-hmm.
We get, she's cussing and saying all the every curse word in the book. She's like we said, Father Father Marin said, do not believe in its lies. And what does the devil do? He tries to play like um Father Karras's mom. It's like, why are you doing this to me? Like this and that, like trying to use that voice and try to mimic her. And he's like, you're not my mother. And he's like really trying to play with his head because he knows that he's vulnerable. We get that scene. We get to see, she's like sticking her tongue out and doing all the kinds of crazy stuff. We get the floating scene, the levitation over the bed, and the bed's rocking, and her eyes like go white. I mean, it's just like, dude, there's like 15 like iconic scenes in like this one
Mm-hmm.
scene. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
you can't even look up on YouTube the Exorcist scene because it's just
No,
chopped up bits of this whole sequence.
yeah, exactly. It's just it's too tough to, and apparently this movie, like this set that they had, it was like a refrigerator basically. It was
Yeah,
like 30 degrees in this thing. It was
so you can see their breath.
freezing cold. You do that today, that'd be CGI basically. But no,
Mm-hmm.
they toughed it out, and that's what I love about this movie. It's authentic, and they're going at it, and then they get the scene where they like the room is shaking, and the power of Christ compels you, and I mean, they probably said that at least 50 times. I was like, dude, how many times can you say that without like fucking up?
Yeah, I thought they would end at 5, but they said it enough times to where it's like making you uncomfortable, like how much they're saying it, like
Yeah,
because it just keeps going. You're like, holy shit, this really feels like forever.
yeah, it does. And they get this, and then we get the scene where we haven't even mentioned this throughout the movie, but we'll mention it now. It happens periodically. We see the face of the actual demon,
Oh yeah.
Pazuzu. Dude, we could go on for 2 more hours if we needed to hit every highlight. I think we've hit most of them, but they're periodically throughout the film, and in this particular scene, we do see the face of the demon there, and it's very quick. But it is scary looking, and we haven't even mentioned the voice. The voice of the it's done by Mercedes McCambridge, was the actress that
What a
did this
name,
voice.
huh? That's a
That it
cool ass name.
Dude, that's a hell of a name.
That is.
And to prepare for this role, she drank a lot, she smoked a lot, she ate a diet of raw eggs.
Ugh.
And what's the even more disturbing part about how she got that voice? Apparently, she sat in a chair or in a bed or whatever, and she restrained herself just like Reagan was in the movie, to the bed, and just tried to make it more like, let me out, like kind of like that restrain, like,
Yeah.
and that's crazy. Like that's sick. Like
Passion for the craft, man.
that's passion. And she pulled it off, man. I mean, the voice is incredible. I mean, it sounds like she's like gargling thumbtacks. It's like, rah.
I thought it
It's
was a man. I thought it was a dude.
No, it's a woman.
Wow.
Yeah. So incredible, incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that happened, and we've got the scenes of the devil, and then we've got the scenes where the demons like kind of coming out, and Reagan's kind of on the bed, and we get the scene where we see the statue of Pazuzu the demon, like from the beginning in Iraq again. We have that happen. We see it, and then they kind of take a break. I don't know how you can take a break after that, but they do. They leave the room and they're get ready to go back in, and Father Marin's like, I'm gonna go back in there. Give me a moment, I'll be back. He goes in there and takes a pill because he's old. He's having a heart attack or something like that. Heart pills, whatever. And he goes in, and they both go back in there and they're doing it. And then the demon starts to play with his head. And he's like, "You're not my mother." And he's like, "Go. You need to take a break." So he leaves, and it's kind of quiet for a little bit while Father Karras is like sitting there, and he goes in. And to me, this might be the most creepiest part of the movie, in my opinion. He walks in, and Marin's just like face down on the bed, like dead. And the whole movie, for a long time, Reagan's been like, chained up to the bed itself. And in this movie, she's like on the corner over here. She's kind of like snickering and like looking like that shit is creepy as hell to me, dude. That's scary.
Yeah, it nailed it. That was a shot that was very ahead of its time. You'd see that in a lot of 2010 movies. But yeah, that shot was very ahead of its time. And the whole like, what the hell happened here? Because there's no mess, there wasn't any noise. She's unchained now, and he's dead. Oh my goodness.
Exactly. So you never know. Did he just have a heart attack and die, or did they get in some kind of fight? Did some? I don't know. And so at this point, he's dead. He tries to revive him and save him, and it's too late. Father Merrin, rest in peace. He's
Rip.
dead. And at this point, Father Karras is like, I've had enough. He grabs Reagan off the bed, and I never really noticed. Like, obviously, he didn't do it in real life, but in the movie, dude, he is like unloading on her.
Yeah,
I
dude.
mean, he is just boom, boom. Because in the movie, if you see, he used to be a boxer, so
Mm-hmm.
he's got some punches. So he is just beating on her bad, and then eventually, this is where we get this ultimate payoff. Take you into me, take you into me, and the demon comes into him, and we see this like transformation of his face where he's like, oh, and like his eyes turn green, and he kind of looks like Reagan, and then he jumps out of the window, down the stairs, tumbles all the way down, blood everywhere when he falls down. The devil is now out of Reagan. She's crying for her mom while she's down there waiting for the exorcism to be done. Kinderman just walked in the door, walked upstairs. He can't believe what he's seeing. You got the priest laying at the bottom of the stairs, dead, blood everywhere. And a 15 out of 10 of an ending. I mean, wow, what a climax to wrap that thing up. I can't. There
Go
you
ahead,
go.
hit the, you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
One of those. It's one of those endings that not because it's scary, but because you're so invested in it, you just hold your breath through the whole thing, and it makes it feel so much longer than it is. So such a payoff, such a redemption, a hero's journey is fulfilled. Father Karras regains his faith at the bottom of the stairs as he's laying there dying. The other priest comes by and accepts his confession in any way that he can. So Father Karras, his faith has been restored. He saved a life, whereas in the beginning of the movie he wasn't there to save a life. He has that kind of redemption. This is Father Karras's story. And we see for a split second that when the demon goes into Father Karras, Reagan is back, and Reagan's like, no, 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 she's whining, and the demon is about 1 second away from killing Reagan in the body of Karras. Karras fights back. He becomes flushed with color again. He's winning. His faith is restored. Sacrifices himself. He has redeemed himself. Book authors, man. Whew.
Yep. And he sacrifices himself, the ultimate sacrifice, and he ends up saving this girl's life. And one little last piece of trivia here for you. I know I told you this after the movie, but I'll say it again. The scene where he falls down the stairs and he's laying there, and the other priest comes up to him and he's like kind of holding his hand, Father Dyer, who's in the film at periodically.
Yeah.
Apparently, they weren't getting the reaction they wanted from him of seeing Father Karras lay there. So the director Friedkin, he walked up to him on set. He's like, "Do you trust me?" He said, "Yeah." He smacks the hell out of him in the face and
Huh.
says, "Action," and then sends him out there. So like, if you've ever been smacked in the face before, that kind of like rage kind of feeling, I guess.
Yeah.
And he sent him out there, and it just made it so great. And that's one of the things, he pushed the envelope too
He-
far,
and
but
it's not the first time either.
not the first time. But he directed maybe one of the best films of all time. And to wrap things up after that, a little bit of time goes by, maybe a day or two, I don't know. And they're cleaning out of the house, they're moving out of the house. Reagan's back to normal. Apparently, she doesn't remember what happened at all. She's still kind of got some scarring from everything. And, Kinderman or Father Dyer's there, and, they're moving on, and they leave, and Father Dyer kind of walks past the steps, and he looks up there at the window. It's kind of boarded up from where everything happened. You just feel the weight, the gravity of the situation and what transpired. And then Kinderman does the classic, like, "Hey, do you want to see a movie with me?" and all that stuff. And then the movie is over.
Happy ending. We don't get the gimmick of, oh, but the demon's still here. We don't
Thank
get that.
God.
We
Thank
get the
God.
payoff. We get the good writing. The story is closed. We are satisfied as an audience, and by God, are we satisfied?
We are satisfied, and that is the ending of The Exorcist. Oh, gosh, there's about a gazillion other scenes that we
Oh yeah.
probably missed and didn't talk about. We tried to cover it all, but we'd be here for another 2 hours.
I mean, we've already been here for what, 2 hours? I mean, why even watch the movie? Just listen to us.
Exactly. You don't need the movie. So I I I feel like I don't even need to ask you about your four pillars of horror. I'm gonna If you want to do it, you can.
Yeah, I don't need to do it, but I'm gonna do it because The Exorcist was the movie that invented the four pillars for me. I got it from here, and I flushed it out a little bit with other horror movies, but Don't Show Me the Monster. I don't have to explain that one. Come on. Be scary at all times, not just when the threat is on screen. Another one. Come on, pretty obvious. One aspect though of watching it in the theater the other day is the sound aspect of it. I can't stress enough how much you need to listen to this movie as loud as possible. I for real, there was a demon in the audio waves, man. I swear to God. Not even just, I'm not even talking about just the sound effects. I'm talking about the frequencies. I'm talking about the timing. I'm talking about the volume levels, the mastering. There was an evil presence in the sound engineering of this movie. You need to hear it as much as you need to see it. So, yeah, man, that eeriness, that scariness does not go away even when the threat's not on screen. So, boom, obviously, don't rely only on jump scares. The scariness of this movie comes from what you don't see. There are jump scares, and obviously it's pretty tame by today's standards because it's from 1973. But I don't need to justify The Exorcist to you. That's doing just fine by itself. And push the boundaries. This movie basically invented that pillar for me. That rule. It pushed more boundaries than any other horror movie I can think of. Aside from maybe practical effects of body horror, I think this pushed all other ones. I mean, from risque storytelling and religious versus anti-religious debates to really risque child sexual undertones,
Yeah.
to the animatronics of the turning the head around, to the directing style. I mean, people talk about Kubrick on The Shining and what he did to Shelley Duvall, but no one really talks about what Friedkin did on the set of The Exorcist, man. He pushed the boundaries in terms of directing, and I'm not condoning bad behavior, but it definitely paid off for him. So that was a risk that he took, and it ended up paying off. But absolutely obliterates my four golden rules. This movie is the golden standard for horror movies. This is an A plus plus. This is, in my opinion, the greatest horror movie ever made. And no, it is not the scariest horror movie I've ever seen. Scariest is an objective term. I can think of 10 other movies that have scarier scenes than the scariest scenes in this one, but that's just not what it's about, man. It is the greatest horror movie ever made. I stand by that, and I always will. And it might not be my favorite, but it is the only A plus plus that I will ever give.
Yeah, I mean, what else can I say that you didn't just say? I mean, this movie is an A plus 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 plus.
Yeah.
It's the highest grade you can give a film in terms of horror, maybe in terms of just film in general. It's done so many things for the horror genre. Like you said, it's not my favorite horror film of all time, but it is one of the best. It's in my top two best of all time. There's only one other film that I need to watch again to see if it even stands up to this. And yeah, I mean, I love Halloween. This movie makes Halloween look like nothing.
Looks like a
Sometimes
student film, dude.
exactly, and I don't, and I understand that there's a big difference between the budget and things they had in between both movies, but this movie just destroys everything. It great writing, great actors, great characters. Is it the scariest film of all time? I don't know. That's up to you. But to me, and it's 50 years later, this movie's still scary to me. It might not be the scariest film I've ever seen, but it's still pretty scary. It still works. The scenes are effective. And if you ever have the chance to go watch this movie in theaters, you better do it.
You have
Maybe
to.
somewhere the rest of this month they'll show it somewhere since the new one's getting ready to come out. But if you ever get the chance, go and see this movie in the theaters. It will change your perspective on it.
A-
It will make
a-
it even better.
Absolutely, absolutely solidified everything. You said it in the beginning. You said the M word. You dropped the M bomb on us. You said masterpiece. I'm backing you up here. I'm dropping the P bomb on you. This is a perfect movie. I don't throw that word around, but this is a perfect movie. I cannot find a flaw with it. Yeah, there maybe Kinderman was a little underdeveloped in some areas, but you're talking about a 2.5 hour movie. This is, for all intents and purposes, one of the few perfect films I've ever seen in my entire life.
Absolutely. Nothing else needs to be said. It's a perfect film. One last thing we'll chat about before we get out of here. The Exorcist Believer. Get ready to hit theaters. Let's talk about it real quick. Obviously, we're going to go see it when it comes out. We're going to do our review. We'll talk about it. I've only seen the first trailer they come out with. I haven't seen anything else. I don't want to see anything else. Movies these days, they give away too much in the trailer. I don't want to see anymore. What are your expectations for this movie?
Well, I'd be wrong to set expectations as high as I said to even come close to this one. Obviously, there is no other A plus plus. I'd be an idiot to expect that. I know that, but you know what? Bear with me for a second.
All right.
There is a South Park episode. It's a Christmas episode of South Park that I'm going to reference here, and it is one where Cartman realizes how many bad deeds he's done throughout the year, and he realizes he's done so many that not only is he not getting presents from Santa, he actually owes presents to Santa. That's how bad he's been. He owes presents. So he's like, well, wait a minute. If I just do good deeds, I can counterbalance that and I can actually get myself back into the positive and get presents. I won't owe presents anymore. So he gets the smartest kid in his class to calculate all deductions for all the bad things he's done this year and additions for all the good things he's done this year. And they tally it up and they calculate to see if he gets positive or negative. And Cartman's like, how do I do? What do I need? And the smartest kid in class says, well, if you cure cancer and AIDS by next week, you'll still owe 3 presents. And the reason I say that is because that's pretty much where I'm at with Exorcist Believer. If if you summon Satan and record the voice of God on camera, you'll still only be second best. So it's impossible to set a standard after the Exorcist, man. I don't care about any of the other Exorcist installments. David Gordon Green. Oh, I'm not going to say you brought a knife to a gunfight, but you brought a knife to a demon fight, dog. You nailed it with Halloween, but what the hell? The Exorcist, man. You're better off doing a shot for shot remake. But I'm going to keep my eyes open. I'm going to keep my ears open. Most importantly, now, I'm going to keep my standards. I'm going to keep my standards humble. With the trailer that I watched, I hope there is some X-rated stuff that they did not show in that trailer because nothing in that trailer wowed me. But we're gonna try it out because The Exorcist is a big name to live up to. David Gordon Green has filled the boots before with Halloween, so maybe we'll be in for a decent surprise. But there is no way, absolutely no way to top this.
Yeah, and I agree with you there, and I think most people do. No one expects this to be better than the original. No one expects. I don't think people expected Halloween 2018 to be better than the original.
Mm-mm.
Some people might like it better than the original, but that's up to them. I'm just excited to see, an Exorcist movie. It's been a long time since I've really even watched the sequel or seen one in theaters. Um, I'm going to keep an open mind, but like you said, I saw the trailer. I saw it twice. I was not a fan. It looked very generic horror
Very modern.
Blumhouse, very like I've seen this 100 times. Maybe they did a lot of that just to, hey, let's put maybe the most tame stuff in that we can in the movie or in the trailer. We'll save all the good stuff. I'm hoping so, but I'm gonna keep an open mind. I don't have high expectations. I don't have I don't really have any expectations. I'm just gonna go and just see what happens. And either way, we're gonna go see it. We're gonna talk about it. But no one's expecting this to be as good as The Exorcist. Can it be a worthy sequel? I guess that will be the question.
That's really the only thing left to question. I mean, Vatican's been real quiet about Exorcist Believer. I don't even think they know about it, so that just goes to show where we're at now.
Absolutely. So, well, thank you guys so much for tuning into Every Horror Film. I'm sure no one sat through this whole review. If you did, I love you. Thank you so much. If you haven't yet, obviously go check out our series we've been doing on A Nightmare on Elm Street this month of October. Go check those reviews out. We're going through all those movies. Last year we did Halloween franchise. Go check all those out. And then obviously check out our Exorcist Believer review once that comes out. Thank you guys so much for tuning into Every Horror Film, where horror is forever. Jeff, it's a great day for an exorcism, but I'm ready to go to bed.
The power of Christ compels you. I'm tired of shit. I don't know how we just did this for 2 hours.
I don't know, but thank you guys so much. We'll see you on the next one.
The mummy has now been located.
The living mummy. The living mummy.
Bullets won't stop.
Some creature out of time.
That was horrible. That was horrible.
He's completely out of control.
I saw those bodies.
Is he a man or a monster?
You actually knew a werewolf in a peaceful town where nothing ever happened.
That was horrible. That was horrible.
In the mystical regions of Transylvania.